We're continuing Hilchos Gezeilah, וגניבה, Sif Beis. Just to recap briefly, last week we learned Sif Aleph. We learned that there's an Isser D'Oraisa to commit Gzela or וגניבה, basically to steal, but it's also to steal from, doesn't make a difference whether it's from a Yid or from a Goy, or from a Gadol, or from a Cotton, and even if it's less than a Shuta, in any case, it's forbidden. Today we're going to continue with Sif Beis. And like last week, I'm going to read inside, and then I'm going to pause and focus on a couple of things and try to explain a little bit more at length what the Alter Rebbe is saying, and if it needs to be brought down a little bit more l'halacha l'maisa, we're going to attempt to do that as well. That's obviously this is a new thing, and this is the way we've started to do it. Obviously, if there's any feedback and any other suggestions of how it should be done and how we should go about it, we welcome that. You can write it on the group or message me privately. But for now, we'll continue doing it the same way we started last week. So Sif Beis. Even somebody who is in mortal danger and needs to take money or property, doesn't matter, that belongs to someone else in order to save himself from sakonas nefashis, from a situation of mortal danger. Lo yitlenu ela al das l'shalim. He can only take it with the intent that he's going to pay it back. Even though all averis and Torah are suspended, overridden in a situation of pikuach nefesh, so you might say, yeah, I need to steal something because it's a situation of pikuach nefesh. I had to take it. I had no choice. Then the owner is going to come to you later and say, pay me back. Say, sorry, it's pikuach nefesh. I don't have to pay back. The halacha is no. Pikuach nefesh taka, you're allowed to take it. All averis and Torah are suspended in a situation of pikuach nefesh. Nevertheless, you have to pay back. See it again inside. Even though all averis and Torah are suspended in a situation of pikuach nefesh, except for the three main averis, the three major averis, of avodah zarah, gilui arayis, and shvichas damim. It's forbidden to save oneself with someone else's money, someone else's belongings, with the intention to pay it back. It can only be with the intention to pay it back when you're able to, when you have the money. Being that it is possible to pay it back. I'm sorry, I realize I have to turn the page on the screen. Good. Okay, so now to explain what is the background of this halach. The Gemara tells us a story. David HaMelech was at war with the Plishtim, as he then often were in those days. And on the battlefield, David HaMelech had a shaila, which he sent, presumably, for an answer. The shaila was as follows: were addition to Sa'irim. Gedisha means heaps, piles of Sa'irim, of barley. The Yisrael Havu, and they belonged to Yidden. And there were Plishtim who were hiding out in those heaps of barley. So the shaila was, as the Gemara, David HaMelech sent a shaila to ask the Sanhedrin, what's the halacha? Am I allowed to set fire to these heaps of barley in order to destroy the Plishtim that are hiding there? So they sent back to him, it's asr, it's forbidden to save oneself with someone else's money. Okay, but you're a king, and a king can do whatever he wants. Fine. So just read the Gemara. It's very difficult to understand. What do you mean? It's a situation of pikuach nefesh. They were plishtim. They were hiding in the barley. They're hiding there in ambush to murder Yidden. What's a shaila? Am I allowed to set fire to this? Of course you're allowed to. All averis and Torah are suspended in a situation of pikuach nefesh. So because of this, and the Taisvis and the Rosh explain right away, that wasn't the shaila. Of course, Of course, it's permitted to save yourself in a situation of pikuach nefesh. You're allowed to do anything besides Rabbi this regular as shvichas dami. However, what was the shaila? Am I allowed to save myself with the intention that I'm not going to pay back because pikuach nefesh? So the answer was you're allowed to do whatever you want in whatever you need. Sorry, in a situation of pikuach nefesh, but you're going to have to pay it back later when the time comes to pay. That's the background in Gemara. And over here, the Alter Rebbe, when he says this halacha, he adds two words: Elal das l'shalim keshetimtza yadeh. You have to pay back with the you're allowed to take with the intention to pay back keshetimtza yadeh when you're able to, when you find the money. The Tzemach Tzedek in the Shalos Tshuvos Chesed Mishpat Siman Mem Vav and Mem Zayin is medayek from here that you're allowed to take even if you don't have the money at the moment, but you're hoping that eventually you're going to be able to pay back. Right now, I need to take it because it's a situation of pikuach nefesh. I don't have the money in the bank account at the moment to pay back, but eventually, I'm hoping I'm gonna make enough money and I'm gonna be able to pay it back. That is what the Tzemach Tzedek is medayek from the words that the Alter Rebbe adds here, Keshatim Tzayad. Now, we're going to discuss a shaila that may not be clear at first how it's connected, but we'll see momentarily how it's connected. The Binyan Tzion is one of the great poskim of the 19th century, lived in Germany. He's better known perhaps by his the title of his sefer, his Pirush on Shas, the Aruch Laner. So Yaakov Ettlinger, I think that's how it's pronounced. So he writes in his Shalos Tshuvos Binyan Tzion Siman Kuf Ayin, shaila as follows: there was a person who was very, very sick, and unfortunately, the doctors they didn't know what to do with him. They didn't know how to cure his illness, and he died. But then there was another person who came down with the same illness. Shaila was, are the doctors allowed to basically perform an autopsy to cut open the body of the first person who passed away in order to try to learn something about his illness and see if maybe they can use that information to save the second person? So that's the shaila. Now, there are many potential issues involved here. The most obvious and most major one is nivel ames. Know that it's forbidden to desecrate or disrespect a dead body in any way. There's pasuk in Torah, kikil aselakim tali. That is the main discussion, the main issue that the discussion on this shaila, that's also discussed by other poskim, as we'll see soon, is centered around. So that's how the Binyan Tzion begins. He just talks about nivel ames and if it's aser, if it's mutter, if it's aser in the case of pikuach nefesh, etc. But then he goes further. We're not getting into the nivel ames shaila right now. It's not our topic. But he says like this: even though all Isurim and Torah are suspended in a situation of pikuach nefesh, and seemingly nivel ames, which is the main issue over here, should also be suspended in the case of pikuach nefesh, he says that's not the case. It's not the case. We can't apply that over here. Why? Because halacha aser lahatzalat b'mamayin chaver. It's forbidden to save yourself with someone else's property, like we just learned. And he says a kal v'chomer. If you're not allowed to save yourself with someone else's money, for sure you're not allowed to save yourself on the cheshbon, on the expense of someone else's covet. You can't desecrate someone else's. You can't desecrate a body in order to save yourself. So if you're not even allowed to take someone's money to save yourself. For sure, you're not allowed to be over on nivel ames in order to save yourself. Pikuach nefesh. Pikuach nefesh is like everything. Says Binyan Tzion, even in the case of pikuach nefesh, it's only permitted if it's al das l'shalim. You're allowed to take it only if you're planning to pay back. But over here, what are you going to pay back? You can't pay back somebody's respect. You can't pay back the desecration that you performed on the body. So he says, therefore, it's also there's no heter. Pikuach nefesh. That's how he concludes. I'm sorry, can't help you.
I love mammon or kavod.
He learns it out from the din of mammon. He says, if
but I'm saying, how are we putting value to kavod? Saying we're putting value to kavod.
He says, kvaydei chavev alav yaser mimamayna. A person would not be willing to let you take his money, his mumming to save yourself. For sure, he wouldn't be willing to let you take his covet.
Interesting.
And pikuach nefesh does not, because pikuach nefesh, even in pikuach nefesh, it's only permitted if it's al das l'shalim. However, the Maram Shik, Moshe Shik, was also one of the great poskim of that time. He lived in Hungary, Ukraine, somewhere else. He was a contemporary. He was a contemporary of the Bnei Sina, and they had a correspondence on this issue. And the Maram Shik writes the main issue is about the Shaila of Nivelames, but he says what you're saying that it's asur lahatz v'mayin chaveri, and it's only permitted even in the case of pikuach nefesh if it's al das l'shalim. He says that's not, you're not learning it right. Because the Tur and the Rosh and the Shulchan Aruch, we see it here in Alter Rebbe, it says the same thing in the Shulchan Aruch, similar lines. They only say that because we're talking about money. In the normal case, you're eventually going to be able to pay back. But if there was a case where there was a situation of pikuach nefesh and you had to steal something and there was no possibility that you would ever be able to pay back, there's no realistic possibility, then for sure, the same halacha applies. Pikuach nefesh suspends every Isser in Torah. So he says you're so the Maryam Shik writes to the Aruch Laner, to the Binyan Sin, says your diuk is not correct. Al das l'shalim means if it's possible, but if it's not possible, the same halacha like applies always. Pikuach nefesh is daicha every avera in Torah. So now let's take a look at the Alter Rebbe again. What does the Alter Rebbe say? Asur lahatzalatze b'mamayin chaver al das pater. It's asur to save yourself with someone else's money with the intention to be pater, to be exempt from repayment, restitution. El al das l'shalim. It has to be, you can only take it with the intention to pay it back. Hoyil ve'efsher b'tashlum. Because it's possible to pay back. What does that sound more like? The Binyan Sin or the Maram Shik? The Maram Shik. Because it's possible, because it's efsher b'tashlum, and that's why the halacha is it's a asur to take al das lipater, only al das lipater, only al das l'shalim. But if it's not efsher b'tashlum, the halacha would be the same. In l'chadavar emed b'pnei pikuach nefesh. In the situation of pikuach nefesh, you would be allowed to do whatever is necessary. L'maisa, since we mentioned it, it's not really our topic, but as far as performing an autopsy for the purposes of atzalas nefashos in order to be able to save someone else. So the Neidah Yehuda in the Chuvas in Yerdeh, Madarat and Yonas Rishud, he writes that it's mutter the Chassam Sefer. The Neidah Yehuda and the Chassam Sefer were before the Aruch Laner, and he addresses them, and he writes in the end that says if the Chassam Sefer is also matter. He says at the end, Karev levadei the mutter. He says if the Chassam Sefer and the Neidah Yehuda were here and they saw what I said, then I would have been vatal daiti for sure. I would agree, but because they didn't get into this point of Gzela, so I respectfully disagree. But Lamaisa, the Neidah Yehuda was Mekel, the Chassam Sefer was Mekel, the Maram Shik was Mekel, and that seems to be the consensus of most Achrein. And just to clarify, they're all talking about performing an autopsy, basically just opening up the body to see what happened over there, and based on that information, hoping to save someone else. But it's really the same shaila to actually to harvest an organ, to take a kidney from a body, to take is it Gazela or not? So obviously it's Gazela either from the person or from Hashem. But the shaila is in a situation of pikuach nefesh, are you allowed to do it? So the Shevet Halevi, Rav Vosner in Shevet Halevi Chilakut Simmer Yishches, he writes about harvesting a kidney, and he says in a situation of pikuach nefesh, obviously it's permitted based on the maskana of the Neidah Yehuda and Chassam Sefer and the Maryam Shik, and it's not an issue of Gzela. Obviously, it has to be under certain conditions, but it has to be only after the person is halachically considered that they passed away. And there are other, obviously, this is one of the most serious shilas that has to be done only with the consultation with an expert, but that's generally the discussion in Achrein. Okay, let's continue in the Alter Rebbe. Even to steal with the intention to pay back, that is only permitted in a situation of pikuach nefesh, like we said in the beginning. In a situation of pikuach nefesh, you're allowed to take with the intention to pay back. Are you allowed to steal something with the intention to pay back in a situation when it's not pikuach nefesh? No. Aval shaleibim kain pikuach nefesh aser. But when it's not a situation of pikuach nefesh, it's aser to steal afilu al das l'shalim davar yafem imenu, even with the intention to pay back something even better, something even nicer. Vafilu l'rfuas chayil she'in beisakana, even for medical reasons, for medical treatment, but in a situation that's not a sakana. Some medical treatments are sakanas nefashos. Some medical treatments are very important, but they're not a sakana. The person will live either way. Or to steal something in order to save oneself from an anos, an oppressor who's torturing someone with yisuri haguf she'in bahem sakana, with bodily harm and suffering that may be very difficult, but it's not a sakana, because stealing is an isur da'iraisa, ve'in misrapin shaleibim kaim sakana ela bi'isuri divrei seifrim, and one is not allowed to take medical treatment in a non-life-threatening situation unless it's an isur derabanan. But an isur deraisa is not permitted unless it's a life-threatening situation. As explained in Shulchan Aruch and Yerideh Siman Kuf Nun Hey. Let's explain a little bit what we're talking about over here. In Yerideh and Siman Kuf Nun Hey, there's a discussion of if a person is allowed to take medicine or some kind of medical treatment that is treif, that is an isser, and in what manner would it be permitted? And obviously, there's a whole world here of medical halacha, which we're not going to get into, but just to explain briefly what is the discussion over there in Kuf Nun Hey, so that we can understand what the Alter Rebbe is telling us here. The halacha is as follows: an isser da'iraisa, something that is aser min hatera. In other words, chazer, chaylev, basar b'chalev, arla in Eretz Yisrael, you name it, is aser unless it's needed for a medical reason that is a sakana, in a situation of pikuach nefesh, and nothing else is available. An isser derabanan is permitted in any situation of chayli, in any situation of illness, even if it's not a situation of pikuach nefesh. It's just a regular, just a medical necessity that's not a pikuach nefesh. What is an isser derabanan? So really, there are two types of isser derabanan. There's a normal type of isser derabanan that we all know and love, that we're all familiar with. Arla in Chutz La'aretz, Stam Yenam. Nowadays, we don't have any. There's no bona fide yayin nesach. It's all Stam Yenam, which is only an Asur derabanan. Things like that. That's obviously an Asur derabanan. That is permitted to be taken in a situation where nothing else is available and it's needed for a medical reason. Number two, another type of Asur derabanan is something that is be'atzav and Asur deraisa, but it's consumed in a way that it's only Asur derabanan, which means the Torah only forbids consuming isurim kederech hana'asa, in the normal way that they're meant to be consumed. In other words, they're prepared, they're cooked, they're not raw, they're not spoiled, and they're not too hot, and they're not too bitter and too disgusting. Taste normal. That is iser. Any other way, like the Rambam writes in Hilchos Asuris, Perek Yudalef Halacha Yudalef, somebody melted chaylev and swallowed it when it was so boiling hot that they burned their throat. Or they ate chaylev raw. Or they mixed together very bitter substances into yayin nesach. Or into a pot that had an avela in it. And he ate it that way when they were bitter. Or he ate something that is usher after it already spoiled and became completely rotten and is unfit for human consumption. Or is a potter. They're potter minater. It's still an iser derabana, but they're potter minater. So these two types of isurim derabanan, Number one, something that's melechatchila and Isser Derabanan. Number two, something that's an Isser Deraisa, but is consumed shaloi kederech hana asik, which means that the way that it's being consumed is only an Isser Derabanan. These two things are permitted in a situation of chayli, a situation of illness when they're needed for medical reasons, even if it's not a sakana. So let's go back to the Alter Rebbe. Ein misrapen shalei b'mkeim sakana ela b'yisuri divrei seifrim. It is medical treatment in a non-life-threatening situation is only permitted with items that are prohibited midirabanan. Obviously means to include both of these types of isurim. Isurim derabanan ve'etzem and isurim deraisa that are consumed shaloi kederech hana asam that are only asur midirabanan. Okay. Moving along. Vafilu lignev almanas l'shalim tashlumi kefil sheretila and hoise v'yadea shalei yakabel minu. Even to steal with the intent to pay back kefil is asur. Why would somebody want to steal having in mind to pay back kefil? Because they want to do their buddy a favor. But I want to do my friend a favor. My friend is very embarrassed, humble, whatever word you want to use, and they don't want to accept gifts and they don't want to accept quote unquote handouts. So I have an idea. I'll steal from him. I'll get caught. I have to pay back kefil. So the best type of tzedakah. Halacha is it's asur. You're stealing, and that is prohibited even despite all the good intentions. When we call makim. If the item that you're stealing is something that the owner is intending to sell, it's not something that is a household item, and the payment for the gzela it exists. It's already there. You don't have to go get it from someone. You don't have to sell something to buy it. You don't have to dig it up from your backyard. It's in your pocket. It's permitted to quote unquote steal. The word we're using here is gzela, but really what we're talking about is buying without permission, because it's something that the owner is intending to sell, and you're selling it and you're buying it from them when they're not there. How are you buying it from them when they're not there? So number one, you know that they intend to sell it. Number two, you have the money, and number three, you have to be lezakes le'atashlumen al yidei acher. You have to, before you take it, pay them. How do you pay them when they're not there? You give the money to someone else, to a third party, and you say, here, you be kind of this money on behalf of the seller. And halachically, that works because of the principle of zachin la'adam shalei b'fanat. You can give a person something that's a schus for them, that they would be, that would benefit them, even without their presence and even without their awareness. Being that the payment is worth more than the gzela, it's a schus for the ningzel, for the owner, as we just mentioned. So we just explained why it's not gzela. Now we're going to explain why it's not gneva. As we mentioned last week, what's the difference in gzela and gneva? Gneva happens in secret. Nobody knows about it. Gzela happens publicly. So we explained why it's not gzela. But it's also not gneva she'ein zo gneva. Because because you have to do a whole transaction with someone else so that they should be mezaka the money to be mezaka the money to the owner before you even take it. So obviously it means there's another party involved. They're aware of it. It's not gneva. You're not hiding from anyone. You're not doing it in secret at all. Where does this halacha come from? So in the same Gemara we mentioned earlier, the Maisa with David HaMelech, the Gemara over there presents an alternative version of what happened. So there wasn't a Shiloh. The Shiloh wasn't like as we mentioned before. The Shiloh was a different Shiloh. There were heaps of barley that belonged to Yidden, and there were heaps of lentils that belonged to Plishtim. And the Shiloh was, can I take heaps of barley from Yidden to feed it to my animals? And I'll pay it back with the heaps of barley that we're going to get from the Plishtim when we win the war. They answered him, a pasuk. Chavel yashiv rasha Gezeilah yeshalim. Pasuk in Yechezkel. Af al pisha Gezeilah mishalim rasha. Even though you're stealing, and maybe you're paying back, but it's still a rasha. It's still forbidden. But you're a king, you can do whatever you want. Okay, so this is the halacha that we mentioned earlier. The steal, amanas l'shalim, even kefil is asr. But says the Rosh in the Gemara over there, what was the situation over there? The David's men wanted to take barley from Yidden and pay back eventually with lentils from Plishtim. They didn't have it yet. But if they had it, and they wanted to take the barley from the Yidden and immediately pay them back with lentils from the Plishtim, and it's something that we know for a fact is intended to be sold anyway, that would be permitted. And that is the basis of, this is how the halacha is passed in Shulchan Aruch, in Chesed Mishpat, and Test, and also over here in the Alter Rebbe. So just to summarize, to buy without permission, you need at least 3 conditions, as far as I can tell. Number 1, it has to be something that is intended to be sold. Why? Because if not, Zachan l'adam shalei b'fanav, it's not Zachan l'adam shalei b'fanav to go into someone's house to take something that belongs to them and pay them. Who said they want it? Who said they're interested? I'm allowed to want to have my own stuff. Even if you offer me a very good deal, I don't have to agree to such a sale, such a transaction. And that's also why this halacha is not a steer to the previous halacha that it's forbidden to take something even with the intention to pay back kefil. So what happened? It's a big schos for him. It's not a schos. Who said he wants kefil? I want to have my belongings. I'm not interested in kefil. So, but over here we're talking about something that is intended to be sold. We know that he wants to sell it anyway. So that's why it's permitted. That's condition number 1. Condition number 2, that the payment is be'en. It exists. You already have it. Because why not? Why does it have to be? Why does it have to already exist? So the Smeh, one of the primary commentaries on Shulchan Aruch and Chesed Mishpat, explains even though you accept upon yourself to pay back something even better, give a very good price. The owners are not interested in dealing with you and going to Bezdin, running after you. They're not interested. If you have the money, good. If you don't have the money, goodbye. So who said he even has the money? So it has to be something that we know for a fact that the owners would be content with. That means that number 1, like we mentioned, it has to be something that's intended to be sold. And number 2, that you have the money. Otherwise, I'm not interested in running after you for the money. And number 3, that you have to be mezakeh the money to the owner before you actually take it, because otherwise, again, if you're not mezakeh them the money, if you don't pay them, that's called goizel amanas l'shalim. You're stealing it now. I'm going to pay you back later, but stealing with the intention to pay back later is permitted only in a situation of pikuach nefesh. But in a situation of not pikuach nefesh, it's awesome. And furthermore, the second reason that you have to be mezakeh the money to the owners through someone else before you take it is because if you weren't, then no one else would know about it, and it would, even if it wouldn't be Gazela, it would be ugeniva. And that concludes Sif Beis, and we'll stop here for today. As Hashem, next week we will continue with Sif Gimel and hopefully onward.
Yes, you go.
Okay.